Ladies and gentlemen, this is Evangelist Isaac Ivbaze.
And this is Oseriemen Ivbaze.
And so what we're going to be talking about today is xenophobic in South Africa.
Okay, when it comes to the xenophobia that's currently going on in South Africa, if you don't already know, a lot of Africans are migrating to South Africa to take residence or, start businesses, whatever the case may be. But as of right now, there's currently a lot of, non-South Africans that are currently in South Africa. And because of this reason, South Africans are definitely getting very irritated. And in a sense, because of that reason, there has been actually some hostile activity towards the non-South Africans. And as for my thoughts on that, I actually believe that that is actually very selfish of the South Africans. And if we really just were to take a step back at this, first of all, the people that are migrating to South Africa, they're Africans, first of all. These are Africans, just doing what they can, finding opportunity, whatever the case may be. They're coming to your country. Let them live their lives. Coming to empathize with South Africans, South Africans may feel, these are imposters. Why are they here? They're taking my opportunities. They're taking my jobs. You can't look at it that way because the presence of these people here are removing you from what you can do in your own country. You shouldn't release your anger on them just because you may be frustrated with what you're going through. They just so happen to be there. Even if the amount of people over there are a lot, they're still doing what they can. I was actually watching a YouTube video where a mechanic, he was a mechanic there. He has a shop. And a group of South Africans actually went and burnt down his shop. And I thought to myself, I'm like, this is someone who has his own stuff going. He has his own business. He's a mechanic trying to make things go by. And these people are coming here to actually ruin his chance at an opportunity. You see that he's hustling. Because if he has a mechanic shop, he has cars there, you definitely see that he's doing what he can, to make money. He's not feeding off of the government or whatever the case may be. So why direct hostile activity at him? In that case, it's just extreme selfishness. And for that reason, I say, at the end of the day, before pointing fingers at anybody, look at yourselves. You guys are all African. This is your entire continent. These people are here. Look at them as your relatives, Let them be here and figure out what they can do. These people aren't lazy. They're trying to find themselves, trying to do what they can. It just so happens that you were born in South Africa. It doesn't remove from the fact that these people are just looking for an opportunity like you are. So in that scenario, I would say that South Africans really, or, the ones that are going through this, if you're a South African today and you don't really have those feelings, don't take this to heart. This is mainly for the South Africans that are feeling some type of way and are actually, putting some sort of effort or force into moving these people out of their country. If you're going through that situation and you're a South African, I would just have to say open your mind and allow yourself and free yourself from, any bad things for these people, because at the end of the day, they're just like yourself, trying to find opportunities. Don't put your anger from your struggles on them. Let them live their life and let them do what they can. And that's what I have to say.
Well, thank you very much, my son. I'd like to say that I wholeheartedly agree with my son. Well, one of the things that I want to say here is that there is no justification whatsoever why there should be an anger against any foreigner in any part of the world. You see, when we talk about xenophobic in South Africa, this has been going on for quite some time. It is an anger that is specifically directed against African migrants in South Africa. And I will say with special reference to Nigerians. But in this case, I'm not going to lay emphasis on just Nigerians alone. I'm going to express my understanding on what has been going on in regard to xenophobic in South Africa. Now, South Africa has been under apartheid regime for as long as we can remember. And it was just around in the 90s, the mid-90s, that Nelson Mandela was released from jail, and then he immediately became the president of South Africa. My expectation was that as soon as there's a black president in South Africa, the first priority would be to help to alleviate the problems of black South Africans. The reason is simply because black South Africans have been dehumanized, they have been segregated against, they have been, in fact, horrible things have been done to them for years and years and years. Unfortunately, many of them did not have the opportunity to obtain the right education that will put them in the right position in life to be able to make a living because of apartheid. And so I expected that when a black person becomes president in South Africa, the first priority would be to solve the problem of black South Africans. And at least the least that I personally would expect from the leadership, of the black leadership, is to set up a vocational school where these young South Africans can be trained, and then after they get their vocational training, they will now be employable in industries and factories and just and be able to make a living. But to my greatest surprise, I discovered that not much has actually come out from Nelson Mandela. In fact, I really don't know most of the achievement that Mandela made. I think he was only there for 4 years. And then ever since, there has been several presidents that have come in. And recently, President Zuma resigned because heap of corruptions, allegations were leveled against him. And so he had to resign. But the reason why these young South Africans, or whether young, I'm not going to use the word young, they cut across different ages, why they're angry with their fellow Africans is because they live in abject poverty. It's because their conditions have not improved. And so they see these African migrants coming to their country and hustling, and sometimes they see these Africans living better lives, living in nice neighborhoods, whereas they themselves are living in abject poverty. So that kind of, as humans, they kind of give them some level of jealousy. But yet, in spite of all of this, I don't believe that there's a reason for any anger against foreigner in South Africa. There's absolutely no reason for it. Because any foreigner, any African that goes to South Africa is there to work, is there to hustle. It's not there to rely on the government. Except those, I can only be angry with those who go there and be selling drugs and involve themselves in criminal activities. But other than that, they are free to go to any part of Africa, and if they are productive and they are not involved in any criminal activity, that's fine. There's nothing wrong about that. So the way I look at this is I think the group of South Africans that are doing this is based on their limited education and their limited exposure. Because, like I said before, part of the reason is simply because they are living in abject poverty, and then they get jealous of these foreigners, as they may call them, who come into their country and begin to make progress. So they get jealous of them. Another thing is exposure. They are just not exposed. And so they get angry with these fellow Africans, and then they start burning their houses and killing them. So there's absolutely no reason for this. And then another thing is South Africans need to understand that when South Africa was going through apartheid regime, all countries in Africa collectively, they put their hands together to make sure that they fight until South Africa obtained their independence. So today, there's some kind of hostility against these young Africans that are going to South Africa. And I am not really angry with South African government, because this hostility is not coming from the government; it's coming from the locals. So the only way we can avoid further xenophobia in South Africa is to begin to educate these locals, to make them understand that their problem is not caused by other African migrants in South Africa. They are not. They are not government. They are not government officials. Of course, they come in there to hustle, to find jobs, and to do whatever they can do. So it is not really the migrants that are coming there. They have to they have to gear their anger and frustration to the government, because the government must live up to their responsibility to see to the plights of these poor, impoverished South Africans. They have to work very hard to improve their condition. There has to be low-cost houses there has to be vocational studies and education for these South Africans, and they need to make sure that at least their condition is reasonably improved. In absence of that, there's going to be these South Africans will continue to be angry with any foreigner that comes into their country, especially Africans. Thank you.
I definitely agree with my dad. Of course, to be honest, a big point that I have to make is this. I would advise the South Africans that are feeling this way to look at the problem like this. If there is a piece of cake that everyone is trying to get at, and you think that by taking a piece of this cake is going to remove the chance from someone else to get this cake, of course you're going to feel some type of way when other people are also trying to pitch in, oh, I want some of this cake, I want some of this cake. Don't look at it that way. The cake is as big as it can get. There's not a limited amount of opportunity. If people come in here and create businesses for you, the jobs that you didn't have are suddenly there now because of their presence. So you can never look at it like, okay, these people are stealing my opportunity. You may be struggling, but you cannot blame that on other people. You can't blame that on someone else who's just hustling. Let him do what he can do. You yourself, the only reason why you should be frustrated is, okay, there's nothing in my vicinity. Okay, yeah, you may look at governance for that or whatever the case. Maybe something that you're not doing. Maybe you're not doing enough, you know. So there's a lot of other factors. You don't always have to blame it on somebody else. That's the easy way out, actually. So I really would just say this. Before you start blaming somebody else about what's going on in your life or why this person is this way, because that takes time in your day, first of all, look at yourself. Look at what you can do for yourself. And if you look at things that way, opportunities will be in front of you. That's just how life is. There's no reason why you should be jumping on somebody else for their hustle. You can't prevent somebody else for looking for a way to hustle. That's just how life is. This is a fellow African. Treat him like a relative. You know, let him do what he can do. You focus on yourself. And, you know, the xenophobia to me is unnecessary, and let's get that out of the air. You know, it's completely unnecessary. That's basically all I have to say today.
Well, thank you very much. Just in addition to what my son just said, I think that there's no question in my mind that xenophobia is evil and it should not be condoned. And anybody that is involved ought to be arrested and prosecuted. You cannot kill somebody simply because the person is in your country, or simply because you are just jealous of the person. So there's no reason, there's no absolute reason for it. We need to understand that blaming somebody for your failure is not going to be a solution to your problem, because you were born and raised in South Africa, so you have more ground than the foreigners that are coming in there. So you have to be able to take the initiative to succeed on your own, and think of something that you can possibly do, not cry now. Think of something that you can do to succeed. Many years ago, I think that was, let me remember, when Ghanaians were coming to Nigeria. A lot of Ghanaians were coming to Nigeria. In 1979, Shehu Shagari, who was the president of Nigeria at that time, made an announcement that all the illegal aliens, we were calling Ghanaians illegal aliens, should leave Nigeria. And at that time, you know, Nigerian government was very corrupt. You know, they were ripping off the nation, and they were cutting away with the billions of naira and in dollars. And then these Ghanaians, our brothers and sisters, who simply came to Nigeria because their country at that time was messed up also by their leaders, they came to Nigeria and they were very hardworking. I remember as I walk on the streets in Nigeria in those days, I see some Ghanaians, they will be outside, they will be doing some manual jobs and all that, just struggling to survive. But in spite of that, the Nigerian government, just announced, they said if you're an illegal alien, which of course everybody knows that you don't need to have a green card to live in any country in Africa if you're an African. So they clearly understood that all the Ghanaians that were living in Nigeria, none of them actually, only few of them were married to Nigerians to be able to have papers. So majority of them really didn't have any, don't even know what green card is. Why would you have to have a green card, Ghana and Nigeria there? But they announced that Ghanaians should leave. If you're illegal, you have to leave. And I remembered some of these Ghanaians cried. They cried because they felt that they had no home to go to. And their country was completely, almost in disarray. So at that time, they had no option because it was a directive that was given by the government. So they had to leave. And while they left, Rawling just became head of state of Ghana, and Rawling was working very hard to put the country together. And after a few years, Rawling had gathered enough momentum to bring the country to a sound footing. And so Ghana began to recuperate from that moment, while Nigeria continued to dwindle their country. And from what we have seen today, Ghana to a large extent is well-footed, very stable economically. I may not use the word very stable, but reasonably stable. I think many years ago, I understood that Ghana celebrated 4 years of uninterrupted power supply. And it was mind-boggling. But what do you say now? A lot of Nigerians have migrated to Ghana. As a matter of fact, the other time I read on the news that billions and billions of naira is being spent for Nigerians that are for Ghanaian universities as a result of Nigerians that are traveling to Ghana to obtain their education. So, and we are not talking about Nigerians who are just living for Ghana to go live and set up their businesses. So right now you have a lot, just like you had a lot of Ghanaians in those days, that's the way you have a lot of Nigerians in Ghana right now. So it just shows that we have to be extremely careful when we are dealing with our brothers and sisters, because we never know what is going to happen tomorrow. But also, this is a sign to African leaders that they need to wake up to their responsibility. Because if African leaders are living up to their responsibility, I don't see any reason why young Africans, or whether old Africans or young, should be leaving their country for another country in Africa to live. There's absolutely no reason for it, because every country in Africa is blessed with one resources or the other. Africa as a whole, as a continent, is blessed with abundant resources. So judging from the fact that Africa as a continent is rich, there's absolutely no reason why Africans should be leaving their own country, going to other African countries because their country is messed up. There's absolutely no reason. The only reason why some Africans are migrating from their country to South Africa is because their countries are messed up by their leaders. It's not because the country is poor, it's simply because their leaders have messed up those countries. Example is Nigeria. There's no reason, absolutely no reason why a Nigerian should be going to South Africa. Nigeria is the richest country in Africa, is the most populous country in Africa. In fact, Nigeria would have been, I think, the most educated and enlightened country in Africa. Don't get me wrong now. But yet, you have more Nigerians in South Africa than any other African countries. So the thing is that it's a shame. It's just a disgrace. So it is the leaders, African leaders, that need to re-examine themselves. They need to come together and think of how to... You see, the rest part of the world is making progress. Unfortunately, Africa is not. So they need to live up to these responsibilities. Stop stealing the money that belongs to your country and taking it to the Western world or Asia and keeping it in the bank there. It is foolishness. It is terrible. So when you do that, you plunge your nation into a deplorable condition and enslave the citizens and impoverish them. And that's what is going on. So my appeal to South Africans You have to take it easy. You know, life is short. You just don't want to have the blood of innocent people in your hands simply because somebody is coming to your country. If life is hard for you, work hard. Life is full of challenges. You know, even if all the migrants that come from other African countries leave South Africa, it's definitely not going to improve your condition. It will not. Your condition will still remain the same. So all you simply need to do, get a vocational education, see what you can do to get something, a skilled job. And then if you do that, you will definitely be able to get a job. And then, you know, you move on with your life. Thank you very much. And so on this note, we're going to be closing today on this particular issue, and we encourage you to continue to tune into this channel. More interesting programs are going to be coming up, and we also want you to subscribe and share this video as much as you can. Thank you very much, and God bless you.
Thank you.
Thank you.